Before we hop into this episode, I have one favor to ask of you. If you've got any kind of information or inspiration from this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you hit the subscribe button. Just like most podcasts out there are more people that watch this show that are not subscribed than that are subscribed. And so if you want to help me get bigger and better guests for this show as we go along, and I hope you do stick along, it would mean the world to me to hit that subscribe button so that we can make it happen. Thank you. Let's get into the interview. Finnian Kelly, thank you so much to take the time to speak with me today. As we were just talking about, this book is timely. I think it's so important. I think so many people need to hear about it. I think your mission, your work is so powerful, and I'm excited to dive into your journey and what got you down this path to begin with. So thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
It's a welcome, James. I love people who are committed to this journey themselves, and to be at such a young age. I'm so excited for you.
I appreciate it, man. Well, you started young too. I mean, in a lot of the things that you were doing, you had a intellect that was profound. And I think there was a point in time when you realized that the intellect could only get you so far. And as being someone that's similar to that, I think a lot of my audience probably resonates with that as well. So was there a switch, and when was that switch where you got out of your mind? It wasn't so much about achieving or getting to the next place, getting secure, but it was more so about how you wanted to feel.
Well, I'd say I'm still in there, to be honest, James. My intellect is a force to work with. And it was really when I'd played out, when it really became aware for me that I even started to realize that this was another option, was when I'd played out every scenario. I was intentional. I was visioning. I was planning everything. I was calculating. I was controlling. I played out every different scenario, and I ended up in a worse situation than I ever could have imagined I ended up in. That's when I realized, all right, this isn't as straightforward as I thought. There must be something more. I had to really transcend my intellect. And that's when I had to start focusing on my present moment experience rather than escaping into the fantasy of the future, because that's what I realized I'd spent my life doing. I didn't actually enjoy the present moment. So the way to comprehend that was to let's really create a great fantasy of the future. And what happens then is your ego gets a bolt of energy. It gets an energy source, and it goes, oh, I feel really good about this. It's why so many people get this boost of energy on New Year's resolutions. They put it out there. They tell everyone, oh, I'm going to do this. It's an idea of the future. Everyone celebrates them. They get this boost of energy, but the problem is it's not sustainable. So then you have to keep going to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And I just had the luxury where I'd played out the next thing so many times that I couldn't trick myself anymore. And I had to realize, oh no, there is no next thing. What next is now? I have to focus on right now. What am I avoiding? What am I avoiding feeling? And that's ultimately how I came onto this great revelation that we need to be prioritizing feelings over outcomes.
See, this is something that we deep down intuitively, we probably know, right? Like we know that there's nothing in the future that's going to bring us the joy, the fulfillment, the excitement, the passion we're looking for, but where we're at right now. But it's similar to like making change in life. We want to make change, but oftentimes it has to get so bad where we're forced to make a positive change. We know intuitively what we need to do, but we rarely make the change to actually do it. And that's why I think intentionality is so timely, and so it makes so much sense that you speak about it, because there's so many people out there that want to make change, yet they're not doing the things that will actually allow the change. So from your perspective, why is that?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is our ego is so strong. And what the ego is effectively a very animal-like construct in us. It's based on survival. It's a collection of our negative beliefs that we've formed over our lifetime that we believe we needed to survive. And in some regards, we did. In our childhood self, we didn't get the love that we deserved from our parents. Doesn't matter how good your parents were, no child got the love they needed. So then that's too hard for a young child to comprehend. So an ego created a story that, all right, I'm going to believe that I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, because that's easier to comprehend than just that perhaps we don't get what we need. So that created a set of pathways in our life and a set of decisions that just keeps us on this train of surviving. But that's not a place of what's ever going to lead you to a higher state of consciousness. It's never going to lead you to peace, love, and joy. So at some point, we have to transcend the animal-like survival construct, ego, instinct, and focus more on this incredible divine life that we're living in. Now, so that's one reason, is we do have a a thing working against us, an anchor. The second is unfortunately, people are scared to go after what they want because the ego tricks them and thinks that, well, there's too big a risk and maybe you won't live if you go do this different path. It creates this narrative, but really what it's creating is it doesn't know whether it's going to exist. It doesn't care about you. It only cares about it. So it creates all these narratives and all these stories. So people won't even decide that this is what they even want. Now, some people may get to the point where they've realized, I want something different. And they set an intention. And intention's great. However, at the same time, you need to add it with commitment. It needs to be a combination of intention and commitment. That really is the spiritual path. That's the spiritual transformation, where it's, I intend to choose love and I'm committed to choose love. There's two key elements. So when you catch yourself going down a different path and its easy option is like, oh no, I'm just going to react right now and yell at someone or do that path, you suddenly remind yourself, oh no, I'm committed to this. It doesn't matter that there's an easier option. I'm going to pick this path right now because I trust that it's going to open up to us. So without those two elements, we can't really create transformation. But if you do just connect to those two elements, my intention and my commitment, anything is possible. It's really quite remarkable. That's the beautiful thing about the human conscious mind, is that we have the ability to use the yang energy, that masculine energy of direction, and the commitment as well. And then we have to use the yin energy of allowing the universe to show us the path and trust it rather than forcing it, where most of us are forcing rather than allowing.
Yeah, one of the things I've worked on these past few years is being open to receiving. That's one of the things where one of my first mentors kind of said, like, even the realm of money, when you hold on to it, it's like a closed fist. I know it's a place that you know a lot about. You're not open to receiving anything if your fist is closed. You might be holding on to what you have, but you're not letting anything else come in. And that's the same thing. It's like those that are trying to be financially secure usually are the most insecure because they're so focused on being so secure about it. I've heard you speak about that.
Yeah, I love that you used that line. That was beautiful.
I mean, it's so timely. I think it's so important for people to come from this perspective. And one thing that you touched a lot about too, and really is a core of this podcast, is belief, right? Is belief loops is the way that you kind of frame it. And I think what's important to speak on when it comes to intentionality and commitment is, where are you coming from when you are taking that action, right? Because if you can take all the action in the world, but if you're coming from a fear-based place, it's always going to continue. Like you said earlier, it's like the goalpost will always continue to move. So coming from a place of love rather than fear, how do we get to that place? Because I know for you, it didn't start there.
No, it didn't. And this is the big difference between context and content. Content is almost the behavior, the actions, or what you're receiving. And the context is, what is the state of being that you're doing when you're doing that action? Two people can do the same action and it can have a very, very different experience. Yeah. So for example, we see this actually a lot in different situations, in sexual harassment, for example, in organizations. One person who's coming from a very loving, kind, authentic place can make a nice compliment to the person of the opposite sex. And it could be even a little bit flirtatious, and it's completely deemed fine because the intent was very pure, very clean, and that other person felt that experience. Now, someone else could look at that person and go, well, I'm going to say the same thing, but they're coming from not the same place. There's a little bit of a lower consciousness. They're trying to get some form of sexual energy from that person, and then same act, very different experience. And people go, that's why people are so challenged all the time, because they go, but that's not true. That didn't happen this way. And it doesn't really matter how it happened. It was how it was received. So checking in and going, what state am I in before I create any form of act is so important. That's what really intention is all right, I'm in this place. I'm only going to make decisions when I'm in an abundant state. Like that's for an example. That should just be a policy to anyone in life. If you're in a place of scarcity or a place of fear, your decisions are limited by the nature of what happens in a physiological experience. When we go in fear, the blood flow gets taken away from our brain and our heart and goes into our limbs in order for us to run away. By nature of that means that we don't have the same form of intelligence to make decisions. So we just know the decisions are going to be compromised. So if we just realized, okay, at any point of time, we can check in to see if we are in love or if we're in fear. If we're in fear, your breath might be constricted. There might be sensations in your body where it feels heavy and tight and constricted. That's a telltale sign, not a good time to make a decision. So then we have a responsibility to change our state. And that's the key thing, is we have a personal responsibility. We have an adversity of taking responsibility for our state of being. We believe we're at a hostage to our state of being, rather realizing doesn't matter what's happening on the external, we can change our state of being. And we can either do that through a physiological experience, changing our breath, regulating our breath, or we could do it through a psychological experience where we just drop into a time in our life where we felt so much love or so much ease. And naturally then our whole energetic state will change. Now we're in a place where we can make better decisions and better actions as well.
This is getting us down to breath work, because this is something that I've become very passionate about. I did my first breathwork session in January of this year with about 40, 50 other people in Austin, Texas.
Amazing.
It was guided by 2 different people. And it was like a lot of people would see it as like people woke up from their experience saying that they died. Other people had just like physiological experiences that you couldn't, you just had to see it, truthfully. People were crying, people were shaking, everything in between. And for me, it was just a peaceful experience that because I meditate every single day. It's just like something that I feel like I get to that state almost most days, just not to that extent, of course. And I think that's why we make better decisions, is from the energy that we come from. It's not that we need more time, but we need to make better decisions, as you've stated before. And so when we get to breath work, you've done darkness retreats as well. Like, where do people go wrong when they come into breath work? Because I think a lot of people have expectations, and you work with a lot of CEOs, a lot of companies. Like, I assume that this is just woo-woo kind of stuff, but you experience it, and it is a physiological experience that you can't escape. It's just the reality of it. It's a profound experience, to say the least.
Yeah, it is. So there's a few things where people go wrong. One is people underestimate it. That's probably the first thing.
Yes.
And they write it off. They go, well, what's breathing? I breathe all the time. And I went, there's a big difference between consciously breathing and unconsciously breathing. Same practice, different intent. So we can use the breath to create different circumstances in our life. So that's one. Another thing is, it's like anything, we get addicted to the high. We focus so much on the experience and the felt perception rather than what do we need to integrate from that experience. And it's one of the beautiful things about breath compared to some other different journeys, is that you can integrate it so quickly, but you still do need to integrate it. You need to take what you learned in that beautiful energy intervention and then go, how do I apply this into my everyday life? If you felt peace and you felt divine love, then stay connected to that. Like, that's a responsibility. You now know that it's available to you. So hold her hand, like hold hand to divinity, carry her into your life rather than going, oh, yep, I felt that. Now I'm going to leave that and go into my everyday life. That's where I think most people go wrong, is they forget that you don't need to always be doing these practices. They're available for you at any time. If you've experienced it once, you now remember that it's in you. It wasn't that you had to even gain it. It was always there. We just forgot. And that's the beautiful thing about the breath. It reminds us of our power and who we really are and what we have access to.
The forgetting and remembering is something that you lead me right into what I wanted to speak on. Was you found breath work in Sedona, right?
Yes.
Sedona,
yes.
Arizona. That experience in itself, you have plenty of degrees. You've been in the military. You've done plenty of things that give you credibility. But when you step into something where you need a certification or whatever it may be, or you don't have one, people have these preconceived conceptions of, are you good enough? Like, are you going to be able to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And you didn't have that, right? So it was something that you weren't necessarily trained in, but it was something that you remembered that you could do. And this is a similar topic to what you speak on in the book, where it's this difference between knowing and understanding. You knew there was enough understanding there, but you knew, but there's a difference between knowing and understanding. And I don't think a lot of people deeply think about that enough. Do you mind breaking down what that difference really is?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your in-depth research. So understanding is the place of the intellect. We hear things, we read things, we consume things. That's something we're all addicted of doing right now. And what happens is our intellect goes, oh, yep, I get that. I understand that. Then you go off into your everyday life and you got this and understood it, but for some reason, you're not applying it. Mm-hmm. And the classic example is just being healthy.
Yeah.
There's no secret formula on being healthy. It's pretty straightforward. Like every information is out there. Every weight loss, every diet, every exercise routine, it's all out there. And people get it and they understand it, but they don't have a felt perception of it. And they go back to their everyday life and they didn't know it. A knowing comes from an experience, from a felt perception, where it doesn't matter what someone says to you anymore. You now know something different. Like people can say all the evidence about why God doesn't exist or divinity doesn't exist, for example. It doesn't matter to me because I know it now, because I felt it. And I don't like other people who are so intellectual and they're so smart, they can come and do all these different things. And my younger self would have felt very intimidated and maybe tried to defend myself. Now I don't even interact. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's like I don't really care what that person is thinking because I know. And that's the big difference. So what we need to do is start trusting our knowing. And paradoxically, I'll also say we need to stop trusting ourselves as well. It's like it's combination. There's a difference. Sometimes we know something and we get so caught up in that, but really it's just a belief that we've just incorporated so long. We need to challenge what we know all the time. But there are certain things where you go, oh yeah, I know that. Like I've felt that. Lean into that more. That's something which so often, because of our intellect, we write it off. There's people who can see energy, feel energy, people who have witnessed angels, all these things, and they write it off over and over again. And then they come to someone like me and I do a session with them and I normalize this and they realize, I've actually experienced this multiple times. I just didn't want to acknowledge it. That's what we need to start trusting. That's the knowledge that we need to really lean into.
So for you, and it's so true. I mean, like again, it goes back to what I said earlier. We all know what we need to do most of the time, but we second guess ourselves. We question ourselves when we have this intuitive knowing, and I feel like our intuition is just connected to the universal mind that you can't escape it, right? Like there's just no way to escape it when you know it, as you've stated, right? You went through a spiritual journey of, I think it was 7 years, and just diving into, after you kind of reached the top, realized it wasn't everything that you were looking for. And then it was like this journey of finding success inward instead of outward. And I love that approach. I think that's the most powerful approach. You went to a bunch of different spiritual texts. And so I'm curious for you, throughout that journey, what was the common thread that you found that was just this deep internal knowing when you read it, when you came across it?
Yeah, it very links back to what we were just talking about, is that we don't need someone else to validate or approve of us. There's no separation between this universal mind, the mind of God, this divine energy source, and us. We're one and the same. But too often in the human construct, because of the ego, really, we believe that someone else, some other man, needs to approve us. And that's been the challenge with religion for so often. The origin, the source of religion was truth, but then man corrupted it by saying, well, you have to play out these certain rules and these and you have to approve, it has to be approved by me in order to get this. As soon as we create that separation, it's not truth. So what I realized was, at our core, we're all one and we are love. And really that's all we need to lean in. It's either love or lack of love. And so we've just got to focus on love. So every moment I keep thinking about my journey. How do I bring more love into my life today? How do I give more love? How do I remember that I am love? How do I receive love? And by playing that out, that's what every religion is saying. Every spiritual text is saying. It's just telling us that we are bigger than what we realized. We are powerful. We are infinite beings. And when we connect to that, it becomes quite beautiful. We realize that we're not alone. There's stories that we've been listening to aren't true. Now, the stories don't go. This is something which I think a lot of people forget. They think someone like me doesn't have any negative thoughts or weird thoughts. If you listen to me, I have some crazy things that come through. The difference is I don't believe them. I just go, oh, that's not true. Because at my core, I know what to be true is that I'm love and I love giving love, and we're all pretty much the same. We are the same. You are a reflection of me, and if I'm challenged by you, there's something I want to learn and grow from that. And that just makes life a lot simpler and a lot easier, I believe.
So you've heard the quote, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself most with, right? Well, that's more true than you could possibly imagine. And what if those 5 people were a human lie detector, an FBI negotiator, an ex-CIA spy, a billionaire, and everything in between? Well, that's exactly what I've been able to do with my podcast over these past few years. From starting in my car with no money, no experience, no following, not even a microphone, and now I'm collaborating with some of the most profound individuals in the world. And it's because of 2 simple things: crafting the perfect pitch so that when the person sees the message, they are open to actually entertaining the opportunity of speaking with you. And number 2, finding a way to get that pitch seen to begin with so that you actually can get in that room. And if you want to learn the skills and how I've been able to get the guests that I've been able to get in my show without any kind of audience or experience, the link in the description will be there for Get Your Guest, my course, and how I've been able to collaborate and connect with some profound individuals and show you how you can too. I love speaking about intentionality, this overarching idea of intentionality, because I think a lot of people mistake it with goals. I think a lot of people see, I'm going to shoot for this thing, and when I get there, X will be achieved and everything will be dandy. But I think there's a difference between goals and intentionality. Like you spoke about commitment a little bit in there as well, but for someone that is coming into this thinking, yeah, of course, like I got to be intentional. I got to make better decisions. I just got to show up the way I need to show up. It is that simple, and it also is not that simple in the same sense. Do you mind breaking down what the difference is between intentionality and goals?
Yeah, so one would be that goals are very external, material achievements, metrics, where intentions are more state of being focused, feelings based. They're more evolving. They're more feminine than masculine. And what I love about them is you can measure yourself against them in every single moment. Where a goal, often you can only measure, have I achieved my goal or not? It might take you 5 years to know it. And then you go down the path and you achieve that goal in 5 years, and you realize you hoped that in that moment it was going to give you some sort of feeling, but you didn't know what feeling was because you did it the wrong way. And you get there and it didn't give it to you. It might have given you a little boost of energy for a second, and then suddenly you have an energetic drop because now the illusion comes crashing down. And what we do, rather than facing it, we just set another goal. And that's how we keep the hedonic treadmill going. Instead, intentions, focus on feelings, we can measure ourselves. If my intention is to bring more love into the world today, it's very clear, moment by moment, am I bringing more love into this world? When I just smiled at a stranger, I just brought a little bit more love. But when I was unkind to someone on the phone, I didn't bring more love into my life. And I can, in an instant, feel it. And I can move in that direction. It also gives me more flexibility as well. Sometimes plans go awry. How often have we set a plan and we realize it was the wrong plan, or the market changes and the plan doesn't work? And this happens in corporations all the time. And then they have this situation where they're actually going after the wrong goal. And people stay in that state because they're so fixed on that plan. Instead, if we focus on feelings and we're going, all right, we want to feel impactful. We want to feel connected. We want to feel inspiring, or we want to feel proud of our work. Then every day they can keep showing up regardless of the market situations. They play out that way. And the funny thing is they might massively surpass the goals, because that's another human element, is we're not very good at predicting things. We're shocking at predicting things. So we might have put a goal which was unrealistic, and then it completely demotivated everyone because we constantly kept comparing ourselves to where we were and we didn't go well. Or we might have completely underestimated what was possible. And then that goal becomes a constraint for us, where instead, if we just want to feel like the most empowering, impactful organization, who knows what's possible?
Yeah, it is so, I think it's like one of the biggest regrets people get to the end of their life is not living a life in true in alignment with what they wanted. And I think so much of that is because we see what we quote unquote are supposed to desire as something that we can see. It's a metric. It's money. It's status. It's the things that we can see. But oftentimes, the things that matter the most are the things we can't see. It's the things that are truly a felt experience, right? And so when we live through that state, life just becomes so much more exciting, so much more fulfilling. And for you growing up, I want to get back to belief loops a little bit because I think this is like the core reason we make the decisions we make or we feel the way we feel is because we have a negative belief loop that is driving the direction and actions we take in our lives. You grew up feeling abandoned and not, and I think a lot of people grow up that way too, and they may not even be aware of it. And so for you, when did that flip switch for you from coming from a place of fear to coming from that place of love, as you stated earlier, and making that be the driving force of your life?
Yeah, so I didn't actually know. This is the confronting thing about negative belief loops is often you have no awareness. And that's why the first step of any transformation is to become aware. And the way we become aware is to have self-reflection, self-inquiry, and being completely honest. And that was one of my challenges. I was doing a lot of self-inquiry and a lot of self-reflection. The problem was I wasn't being fully honest with myself. It was too hard for me to confront. So this is why sometimes having some other person to reflect back to you is really helpful. And sometimes the coding is so strong that it's like so ingrained into you that until you have a pattern and you look back and you're like, oh wow, I'm creating a series of events here, you won't realize it. So for me, I had to wake up through pretty traumatic experience, and that's definitely one way to become aware and awake. It's just not one I'd recommend. It's pretty challenging. It's very confronting, and not everyone has the agency or the support to be able to get through it. And that's really why I wrote the book. Was I wanted to help people catch it before they create this cycle. And when you read the book, you'll identify, you're like, oh, I'm doing this. And then maybe you haven't sabotaged your life completely so you can catch it and change it. But that's where you have to have the intention and the commitment, because it's easier to stay where you're currently at. Even though that's a lie, it's a trick, it's going to end up being a lot more challenging. So for me, what happened for me was I had to create the greatest abandonment of all time. I had to have my wife leave me and have loss of money and all these situations. So then it created that narrative to even be stronger, that I can't trust anyone and that I'm always going to be abandoned. And what I did in that moment, because I was lucky enough there, I'd played out the other scenarios so much, I couldn't trick myself anymore. There was a moment where I went, all right, I'll find another person, I'll do this business. And I went, I've already done that so many times. I have to go explore. I have to see what's happening inside of me. I had to take responsibility and go, perhaps I'm the creator of this experience in my life. And it was that moment where I was able to do some exploration work and realize, wow, I've had a core negative belief of I'll be abandoned. And that's why I also created a lot of my success, because it was the material success, because it drove me. It drove me to earn money, be independent, go travel, do all these different things. And it wasn't that any of them were wrong, because you'll see that that's what I'm doing now. This is the key thing, is people think, oh, it has to be one or the other. No, it's all comes back to what was your intent behind it. My intent for all of that was, hopefully one day I will feel like I won't be abandoned. Or if I create all these situations, then I'll be completely safe. But the problem was, it was based on a fear paradigm. And that's always going to collapse. It's never going to actually be sustainable. So I had to do my recoding work to realize that I'm the only one who can ever really abandon myself. And once I was able to release that fear of abandonment and realize that I'm actually always fine, I'm always alive, I'm still here, that was when I could start leaning into life again. Now, I had this great question. A great entrepreneur and friend rang me up the other day after he was reading the book, and he actually spoke about this. And he said, how do you know if the feelings are right, and how do you know the path? Because here you were at the start of the book, you had all these things and you realized it wasn't the right thing for you. And I had to correct him. I said, no, that's not true. If you look at my life now, it's nearly identical to that life that I spoke about at the start book. I'm still living in a ski resort, skiing a lot of days. I'm with a woman I love. I'm creating businesses. I'm doing all these different things. The energy that I'm coming from is very different. My state of being now, I'm not doing it because I need to prove anything or feel worthy or create safety. I'm doing it out of genuine love. And that's the tricky thing, is sometimes our life is nearly right, but we've got to change the approach, how we're doing things.
Yeah. Again, it's the things that we can't see that are the most important in life, really. Our energy, the way that we show up for ourselves, the way we feel about ourselves. A guy named Tom Bilyeu, who has a podcast called Impact Theory, he said a quote many years ago that has stuck with me. I've probably said it on this podcast 50 times. All that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. And that stuck with me so deeply because it was similar to you, where we're trying to fill a void within ourselves through achievement. And then you achieve the thing and then you realize, okay, still feel the same as when I started the journey of going to achieve the thing. And so that's not going to really fill the void. For
It
you,
actually feels worse. That's the scary thing. It gets worse. And I like that quote, because that's why I do darkness retreats. That's why I do silent meditation retreats. That's why I spend so much time alone in my nature. It's exactly that, is I need to love my own company so much. And this isn't egotistical. I just have to be okay with myself that none of the rest really matters. And then you're not in fear of losing it. Everything is just more like, oh, wow, I get to appreciate all this absolute abundance. But most people can't spend 1 minute by themselves. As soon as a minute comes, they jump on their phone and they distract themselves because they have such a uneasy relationship with themselves.
Yeah, it is the thing. Meditation, like I said, has been profound for me too. I think giving time with yourself, because we want to avoid that time with ourselves, the thoughts that come up. We realize when we're by ourselves that we don't really like how we feel about ourselves. And like you said, it's almost worse when you've achieved the thing, because then you have nothing to look outward or attach yourself to and think, well, when that happens, then it's going to be fine. At least when you're at the bottom and you don't have any security or anything that you're looking for, you at least have this false sense of hope about a thing that you can achieve. And the journey in itself is, I think, really what is most people are looking for. For you, one thing that I find fascinating about a lot of the people I speak with is they create voluntary suffering in their lives. So that could be a darkness retreat. It could be a meditation retreat and not speaking. For you, it could be going across the northern coast of Spain, or I know you just did I think you just did a hike with Colin O'Brady recently as well. Just like stuff that's just hard. It's just difficult for you. And I think that that's some of the best stuff in life, because when we really look back on our lives, it's not the things that we achieved, but it's more so the hardest moments in our life that create the person that we are. And those are the most enriching experiences that we can have. For you, how have they taught you about yourself? And when I say they, I mean whatever experience that that's important to you that was a difficult experience for you.
Yeah, it forced me to drop into the present moment and actually feel. That's probably the most important thing, is these situations helped me really feel. Most of us have such an aversion to feeling that anytime a feeling comes in, we actually suppress it, express it, or numb it. So when we actually feel, that's when we are able to release these negative belief loops, because that's all negative belief loops are, is just suppressed energy that we didn't feel safe to feel at some point. Now, the hard stuff is an interesting one. I have an interesting relationship with it, because there's a lot of people out there preaching about you've got to suffer and you've got to put yourself through pain in order to grow. That's a very masculine approach, and it's not actually how I see it. I see these things as more expansive and exploring, but I'm not trying to tick anything off. I'm not trying to prove anything to myself. I just love seeing what's possible. I love exploring. And sometimes when you get into a place of discomfort, you get out of your head because you're just so focused on being present, that's when you get an expansive opportunity, or a really great moment. So I want to preface, don't always go for the suffering, because that's just crazy. Like we actually do that too much. All of us doing that every day. Like we're creating these narratives to suffer from. Instead, how do you create environments where you just get better at feeling? And it's not even feeling better. It's about getting better at feeling. That's what I'm focused on. That's why I put myself in these situations. So I can't avoid myself anymore, and I have to actually feel.
That's the real work, because the idea of, if I suffer more, then I'm more worthy. Our ego loves that sense of pride of, I put myself through all of this pain. I ran 20 miles this morning, and so I'm worthy of having this meal or going into the day and feeling better about myself. But how are you feeling? Are you just feeling on a day-to-day basis? That is the core that's so important, that I don't think a lot of people take on that perspective. One thing that I love to ask, a lot of authors come on the show, and I'm always curious because I find that the book that authors get the most from isn't the one that they read, but it's more so the one they write. So for you, through your experience of writing this book, what did you learn about yourself?
So I learned a great deal. I learned that it's a continuous journey. Just because I've written this book and I'm there teaching it, it doesn't mean I'm perfect. I am constantly applying this myself, and I have to be so attentive and so aware because my ego is so tricky and so cunning. And actually, as you get a little bit further on this path, it becomes more cunning. So it can trick you at certain moments. So that's been a big one. Another one is I'm really proud of how I showed up during those 7 years. That was a big recognition for me. I'm often very hard on myself, but then after writing this book and reflecting on everything I went through, I feel very content, which is a feeling that I actually always had a fear of. I believed content was that you would stop and you meant that you just were being lazy and not moving. But what it actually was for me, why I was so fearful of it, was because I didn't believe I was worthy of being content. Now, when I'm content, does it look like I'm stopping? No, but I can still honor the experience and go, yeah, this is a beautiful moment in my life right now. I'm content and I'm still open to more, but I don't need it. I'm open to it. So that's been a beautiful journey for me as well. And another part is probably just the authenticity. I'm actually doing it, and it's been nice to. It's probably been the most beautiful thing about this journey is when I've been interacting with people. No one's ever questioned me. Some people write things and they teach things and they're not actually living it themselves. And I've never had that questioned of me, and that feels very peaceful for me.
Yeah. I mean, again, like the doing it is, you don't need a certification. It's the doing of it that gives you the credibility within yourself. And I think, again, it goes back to knowing so much instead of just this falsehood of understanding that we rely on so much in this world. Like I personally didn't go to college. I didn't see any value in it for me. And I feel like I've learned so much more from life and travel and entrepreneurship than I could from learning from someone trying to teach me something I'll probably never use. And I think a lot of people are in that place where we just want to get into action and create and just create something we're proud of. And something that you have learned a lot about, science is something, quantum physics, stuff that I am truly fascinated by. I started reading quantum physics, Joe Dispenza's work, probably 3 years ago now. And it was one of the things that really dramatically changed my life. For you talk about the scientific manifestation process. I would love for you to dive into how we can use the quantum role or idea to kind of manifest in our lives, because a lot of people have this idea of manifest that isn't true, isn't what it actually is. I'd love for you to dive into that.
Yeah. So often when we're creating, we focused on the goal or the outcome. And then we look at it of going, well, this has to be a linear set of actions in order to get there. And it's a lot of hard work. It's very masculine. It's grinding it out. And that's one way of doing things. But if we step back and understand, all right, in the quantum world, there is no time and space. It's just happening now. That means creation is instantaneous. Then perhaps there's another way of creating. And if we connect to why do we ever want an outcome or a goal, it's because we hope it gives us a feeling. Then if we change the order and go, well, if I know that if I've got an outcome or a goal, I've got a feeling, and knowing through just the law of inverse transformation, law of cause and effect, when we have A, we have B, and when we have B, we also have A. It means if I have the feeling, that must mean that I must have the outcome as well. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we flip the order of priority and focus on, let's start connecting to this universal mind where every creation that ever has and ever will comes from. And let's get connected to the feeling state and then allow the subconscious to go ahead and start bringing this forward for us. So I've broken it down into 3 steps, and they're about clarify what it is that you're going after, that you want to manifest. Then it's conceive, which is making it with, like, creating it with the divine feminine. And then it's claiming. It's the 3 steps of actually making that possible. So the first step is you have to clarify. This is where the conscious mind has to take ownership and it has to go, this is what I want to bring more in my life. If you can't do that, then you're just at the whim of everyone else. That's effectively how most people live their life. Other people are running their lives. So we have to clarify it. And that's all the conscious mind. We then go through a process of conceiving it, where the masculine effectively impregnates the feminine, which is the conscious mind impregnates the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind only takes directions by feelings. That's how it takes on orders. So once we have a strong enough feeling, the subconscious goes, oh, I believe that. And now access to the universal mind to start putting all these things into place, pulling it together. And then the third step is you need to claim it. It's not good enough just to feel it. You need to actually take the steps. You need to do it. Now, the universal mind will be communicating to you and bringing different opportunities. But if you're too busy thinking and looking internal rather than looking external out there, you won't see the opportunities. And that's where the 3 steps really come to fruition. And I've laid this out in a physics formula so you can't question it. And once again, I go, don't trust me, go practice it. If you practice this and you do it, you will be amazed and you'll realize, wow, I can create anything I want. Now, you have to release time and how. Those are 2 things that you don't get to control. But if you just stay in the conviction that you have created, at some point, you will have this moment, which happen regularly to me now, where you'll be suddenly getting this feeling of deja vu. And you'll be realizing, oh, it's happening right now. This manifestation's coming to fruition. I forgot that I even created that manifestation. But here I am, a certain amount of time later, and it's happening. And you'll just laugh. And more of these things will start happening in your life. And then you'll also realize you've also been manifesting all the unpleasant things in your life as well, because you weren't being disciplined with your thoughts. You're putting energy towards them, playing into the ego's narrative, going to bed, impregnating the subconscious with negativity. So no wonder why this is what you're creating in your life.
It is more true than I could put into words, because this, when I heard you speak about this, this was something that I have experienced the past few years. One place, just to give context for people that are thinking, this still sounds kind of woo-woo in some way. Like it's real. It's so real. And when you experience it, there's no denying it. A few years ago, growing up, I always, like, the number one place I wanted to go to was Hawaii. It was the dream place. I grew up watching shows of Hawaii. Like, it just seemed like heaven. Never did I think I would get there as early as I did. I've been here for 3 months, and I got here at 20 years old. I'm thinking, didn't have an idea of when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. I just had this idea. It's probably going to happen, and it happened so much faster than I could have imagined. But I look back on all of the days that I spent feeling and vividly experiencing as though I'm there before I'm there. And so it feels normal that I'm here. Like, it just feels so, I feel like it makes so much sense. And I think practicing what you want to happen before it happens, emotionally attaching yourself to an experience or a place or something that you want to achieve, it happens so, like, you can't put it into words. It doesn't make sense sometimes. And I think that's where, if it doesn't make sense, we can't accept it. And that's something I assume that you probably deal with a lot, especially the high level intellects that you work with.
Exactly. One of the biggest challenges is when people go, "Oh, that's not logical." And I went, "That's probably the best decision then, because your
Right.
logic is limited. One, you're not a genius. Like I very few people have like a genius where they play out every scenario. Your emotions always affect your logic. So anyone who thinks they're a logical being, it's a lie. They just actually haven't accessed their emotional state. They haven't allowed it, and it is definitely driving their decisions. And this is what goes wrong in corporate companies all the time. It's why we have such volatility in investment markets, because it's not logical. We're human beings. And the logic is limiting. It's the intellect again, trying to make sense of things. And we are never able to make sense of divinity. There's no words that can describe it. So there's always going to be something that we just have to trust. We have to lean in. And part of this manifestation process is most people are just so impatient. And then they go, well, the manifestation is not working. The key with the manifestation is you've got to claim it. And part of that is you've got to be the energetic frequency that is pulling that to you, which means that you have to believe that it's happening. And if you knew that your manifestation was guaranteed, does it matter if it happens in 1, 2, 5 years? No, you'd be at peace. The problem is people still don't trust it. And that's why it keeps pushing it away. Where you didn't doubt, you didn't wonder when it's going to happen, you just knew. That's when you know you're doing manifestation. When you wake up, and I always say to people, like people always ask, how do I know that I've done it? And I went, trust me, you'll know. Something will happen in the conception. You will wake up and you'll feel confused. What, it hasn't happened? Or a bolt of energy will come through you, or you'll have this vivid dream. And I don't know how that's going to play out for you, but you'll know, and you'll come and tell me when you know. And then at that point I go, beautiful. Let's just claim it and let's go on to the next manifestation. And powerful people who get this, it's incredible. And you start seeing people who really have belief in themselves, and then they start applying this. It's like they're literally molding their reality constantly. It's amazing.
It is so amazing, because this is why I created the podcast. Was I was so just fascinated with how our beliefs drive our decisions, create our life, attract things to us, push other things away. And it is such a core knowing, again, that you have to have. And when you have it, life, you start seeing opportunities that were already there before, but because you believe in something, you start to see it more. And just life just gives you opportunities because you know that they're coming your way. It's such a powerful thing. And I think, as you said, you don't know for those people. A lot of the people you work with, I assume, are just people that are high intellects like you used to be, and still are in some way, where just type A kind of person, where it's always about achievement. And something that I realized when I got into personal coaching at 17, I had this belief that this was the path I was supposed to go down. I didn't know why, didn't know how, didn't know anything about what I was getting myself into, but it felt right. And one of the things that my first mentor taught me was that because I had a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of people have imposter syndrome getting into something. I assume for you, breath work is like, without a certification and you have the first experience, there's so much imposter syndrome because you've never done this before. But you don't have to have the answers. You just have to have the questions. I think for you, for coaching with CEOs, whoever it may be, it's like you don't have to have the answers because you're not in their position. You wouldn't have the answers, but you have the questions to get them to their own answers. And I think that's such a core thing that is, again, it's hard to accept that we always look outside of ourselves for the answers, whether it's what we want to do with our lives or what we need to do with X business problem, but we all know. And so the questions that we ask is what's going to get us there. And I just think it's so powerful. And I could assume it happens a lot with the people that you work with, is there's this hesitation when they first start working with you. And then they get to realize it's just like, this person is not anything outside of me. It's just having someone outside of me that makes it so much easier for me to get to my own answers that I already know.
Totally right. It's about connecting to presence, and through presence, insights come through us. So by me being present with the person in front of me, enables them to be present, enables them to be honest. And then this presence where all intelligence comes through, and I will be witnessing what's coming through me. I'm not coming up with that. I'm not thinking that. It's just coming through, and it was exactly what they needed to hear at that moment. Also, a lot of the time, it's what I needed to hear in that moment as well. So it's a beautiful joint dialogue. And as soon as you start thinking about coaching, you're not coaching. It's being present in the experience and trusting, and then saying what feels uncomfortable. A lot of the times there's something that comes up and I'm like, oh, am I really going to say that? It makes me feel so uncomfortable. But that's what needs to come through right now.
Yeah. One thing I heard you say in a recent podcast I really would love to dive into is that you change the subconscious through energy, not time. And that time is what suppresses the belief that we have or whatever it may be. It's not that it goes away, it just suppresses it. And usually it just means we hold on to it even more. But we feel as though time heals all, but it really doesn't. So what does that look like to kind of get to the bottom of things? Because the longer we go on, subconscious just suppresses more.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of sayings out there which are doing a lot of harm to us. They're effectively faulty coding. And words are spells, and we've got to be very careful on what spells we're putting on ourselves. So when we just go, oh, it's okay, time heals, maybe not. Like for me, if time healed, why was I realizing 20 something years later that an event that happened at 10 years old was causing the end of my marriage right now? Time definitely doesn't heal. What heals is energy, because that is what created the negative belief loop in the first place. Was it was a certain amount of energy that we didn't feel comfortable to integrate at the time, and we went, oh, I don't want to deal with that right now, suppress it, and then it just keeps creating more energy attraction to that over time. So until we drop into the present moment and we use energy to dislodge that energy and release it and integrate it effectively, rather than even releasing it, just integrating it, we aren't free. So that's really the key practice, is constantly going, okay, what is it that I need to integrate right now? What's the feeling that I've been avoiding? And when we do that, we become a little bit freer. We become a little bit more liberated. And before you know it, you start noticing that overall your life is feeling a lot more peace and a lot more love and a lot more joy. And it didn't matter what was happening on the external, you were still feeling that. And then the funny thing is, you can also have all of those external achievements as well. And they actually do make you feel pretty good, because money is a magnifier and achievements can be a magnifier. So if you're feeling really whole inside and then you do some really great things and achieve some great things, it will amplify that. But if it gets taken away, it doesn't affect your current state of being. And that's the key. That's when you start feeling completely free.
Yeah, this is, again, I love everything that you're putting into the world. As I said before we hopped on this podcast, if there was a book I wish I wrote, it would be yours. Genuinely, all of the work that you're putting into the world, what haven't we talked about that you feel from your book, from your work, from your experiences that you've had, that you feel people need to know about?
Well, I want to touch on that comment you just wrote about the book. Is you still can write this, because your experience will be just as valid as my experience. And it's not that this is something which so many people get wrong, is they keep thinking that their ideas are original. I don't believe there's an original idea out there. It's none of us. It's not our ideas. It's someone else's ideas. And just because it's been done so many times before doesn't mean it's still valid. You might be able to have a way that communicates it in the zeitgeist of your generation, which might be so much more impactful than mine. And so many people stop doing something because it's been done before, and that's really sad. So I encourage you to explore that, be passionate about it, and go, what is that I want to be writing about? And start writing, start exploring that for yourself. So that's definitely one. And otherwise, probably the only thing we haven't spoken about is just how extraordinary this life can be, how expansive and a human expansive experience is available to you. There is nothing to fear. Fear is the great illusion. Fear is the ego. When you fully lean into a place of love, there is no fear. Fear and love doesn't exist in the same state. Yes, you'll have little moments of a survival fear, which is okay, but to be imprisoned by fear, that's the worst fear. Like, that's the worst state of being. So what would life look like if you realized that all of that fear was a giant lie and you can't lose? There is no losing in this life. That's something I'd love people to explore. Start playing with this life. Start having fun, being like a child again, playing games, and not buying into the narrative that is out there in this world. Go your own way, like explore it, challenge the status quo, because that's what we need more of. We don't need more sheep. We need more people who are just willing to just rock it in their own individual ways. And that's the only way I believe we can actually live an extraordinary life, is to celebrate our uniqueness and go after it.
1000%. Fully aligned with that. It's the reason I started this podcast, was because, of course, there's 1,000 other podcasts out there that are probably talking about similar things, having on similar guests. But if at least the way that I can ask questions or I can carve a conversation is going to be different and hopefully received in a different way than other people. And you're right. I definitely will write a book one day, and there's going to be a lot of things that I learned from you that are in it, man. And I think it's so powerful. Again, it's so timely. There's one last question I ask every guest, and my question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
Oh, great one. I'm not safe. That's one I've identified recently, that I've never felt safe in any relationships, and that I'm not safe. So that's something I'm deeply working on right now, is reminding myself that I am safe and I can be safe in relationships. I just have to really explore it and make safety for myself, rather than creating a story that I can't be safe.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. Of course, all of your links will be in the show notes below, but is there anywhere or anything you'd like to direct people to?
No, you do all the links at the Finnian Kelly is my Instagram, and then intentionality.com will set you on the path to get everything you need.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, James.